Johnston here. Lukevich here.
Scafidi here.
Corral here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
We've got Alderman Guzikowski is excused. Item 2 is minutes of the June 28th, 2016 meeting.
Dickman makes a motion and we approve the minutes of the June 28, 2016 meeting.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Furlong.
Lukevich, aye.
Scafidi, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Item 3 is significant common council actions. Carrie.
There were none, actually. It was a lovely piece
Is
of
that
paper.
why it says no significant common council actions on my
We
report?
probably could have put that on the agenda, couldn't we?
right.
Saved a piece of paper.
Let's file that. That takes care of 3. We've knocked 3 out of our dozen items. All right, moving to old business. Item 4A is a conditions and restrictions for a conditional use permit request for a self-storage facility submitted by Kelly Gallagher, Self-Storage Ventures LLC, and the property is located at 6304 and 6340 South Hull Avenue and 137147 and 209 East College Avenue. Tax key numbers as listed. Carrie or Doug? Carrie?
I will take
Carrie.
this one. So this is, as the Plan Commission will recall, this was held at the last meeting so that staff could work with the applicant based on some of the proposed conditions that were different than what staff had proposed. We have had some conversations with the applicant's representative. There were a couple of changes that were made based on those conversations.
You got a new handout right before the meeting. Did you get that?
Yes.
Okay.
So the few changes that staff made to the conditions and restrictions are listed in the report. Page 3, section 3A3 was changed to state space sufficient for parking one vehicle adjacent to ground level storage units and internal unit entrance doors based on the applicant's request. And also page 3, section 3J, we added the word any just to clarify that any access off of Howell would be required to get the proper approvals. However, staff is not at this time proposing any other changes to the conditions of approval. Staff has reviewed some of the information that was provided by the applicant's representatives this afternoon. And staff's position actually has not changed. We feel that the appropriateness of the building architecture would require compliance with code. As far as the landscaping is concerned, we'll continue to work with the applicants to make sure that the landscaping as it comes up in further iterations will comply with the code requirements, but we're not at this point proposing any changes to the requirement for landscaping.
So walk me through that item, because they've in their attachment or their handout, they've highlighted or redlined entrance elevations of the perimeter buildings. What are we talking about?
So I will project the concept plan that they are proposing.
And it seems like it should just focus really, since it's the second go around, on the things that are redlined, right? Is that what we're talking about, really?
Yes. So what the applicant and the representatives are proposing would be, as soon as it comes up, landscaping that would be outside of these areas. So not necessarily in front of the buildings, but rather on the remainder of the site, perimeter landscaping. There is a highlight. Oh.
Yes, no?
Sorry, bear with me just 1 second.
You enter the code?
I will do that in just a moment.
Just reading the directions on the screen. And the applicant is here, are here. Good to see you. Did you come from England this time or no? No? That's right. Are you Utah? Hopefully that's not a secret code.
All right. No, it's not.
It's your desktop? Pretty organized.
There we go.
Boom. Okay.
Okay.
Good color.
So, this is the map that is being proposed. It's a concept plan at this point. But what is important here, the areas that are highlighted in pink are what the applicant is proposing to be the visible perimeter of the buildings that are proposed. The areas that would be proposed for landscaping obviously are highlighted in green here. But what you'll notice is that the area that would be adjacent to the building that would be required for landscaping is not highlighted in green. And that's the area that we're talking about. Now, some of this has to do with the fact that, you know, this is just a concept plan. We don't know exactly where the entrance elevations are at this point until the architecture comes in. However, staff feels that we shouldn't remove that requirement until we know exactly what the architecture will be for the proposed building, so that we're not, you know, taking away landscaping requirements where they don't need to be taken away.
So there, literally those pink shaded areas would be additional landscaping beyond what we see in green on the west and north.
No, sir. No? What the pink areas are, that's what they are considering to be the visible perimeters of the buildings. That doesn't mean that that would be where additional landscaping would occur. They're just highlighting the areas that you can see from the road.
Okay. Yeah, you've got something to say, come on up and say it. I want to just focus on the areas of contention. Otherwise, we'll be here all night.
Thank you.
Let's figure it out.
Since I'm the originator of the pink shading, I'll cop to it. Attorney Brian Randall of Freebird Finnerty and St. John, 330 East Kilbourne Avenue in Milwaukee, here on behalf of the applicant, who is here, Kelly Gallagher, as well as Matt Clementi, who's our project engineer. The pink visible perimeter really is to indicate what we'd like to talk about on the building design, which is the flip side of our handout, so that's next. My understanding is, and I don't know if this tracks, or if I have this one working, your guys is probably going to work better. What we're talking about is on the ends of the 6 parking spaces. There is no green landscaping to the tune of 3 feet wide in that location. Yeah, somebody else is putting the arrow up there. Thank you. Staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but Matt Clementi had some conversations last week, and we've been focused on that's what this provision relates to. And rather, because we have no entrance elevations on any other facades, as Director Seymour emphasized to us back in February, the very first meeting, don't have our doors, no storage doors facing the outside. So the office is right here, the entrance elevation of a building along College is right there, and those 6 parking spaces, we understood by code, need a minimum of 3 feet of landscaping, although the Plan Commission can waive that. And we've submitted to staff and in our materials that you're all aware of, we have landscaping everywhere. The mayor implored us to make sure the quality landscaping is there, so we believe we're providing well more than 3 feet of landscaping in exchange for what we're not showing right there.
Well, Carrie, do you not put any stock in the, how he phrased it, the exchange for all that really cool landscaping on the street elevations? Do we really, really need 3 feet by the parking spot?
It's up to the Plan Commission whether or not you want to make an exception to that portion of the code. However, I would caution you that this is a concept plan that can change. So we don't know exactly what the landscape plan can be. It could look exactly like this, it could not. So I think staff's position is that we wouldn't want to, at this point, remove the requirement until we have a finalized plan to look at.
Thoughts?
My thoughts are it's the chicken or the egg. The next step is the building and site plan approval process. I think I would submit that we would be well aware what our buildings generally ought to look like, and if we were to deviate from that, we would have to amend the existing CUP and move on from that.
Why not?
Kelly Gallagher, 3114 East Hunters Ridge Way, Heber City, Utah. What it comes down to is that if I'm forced to put in the landscaping there, I have to reduce the size of that 2-story building by a minimum of 3 feet, which then destroys the integrity of the valuation that I have on the asset, as well as everything else that I'm working on, from financing to the drawings, to everything that GC is going to do. So I would be more than happy to stipulate that that would not be allowed to be changed in a conceptual design for that purpose, that we would not change that component in such a way that would cause something different to happen where those parking stalls are. It's really a hardship issue as to the size of my building by having to incur the 3 foot. So we tried to overcompensate for that by adding around the perimeter.
The final thing, and I won't even bring Matt Clementi up here to say this, but what he wanted me to remind you is the reason Kelly can stipulate that's how our the reality will lay out, because we're trying to line up with the existing median opening, and I don't think there's a curb cut, but the reality is the median opening, we don't want to have to work with the county to relocate that. So the 24-foot wide drive aisle has to be there. We have to have the swing to park cars there. So that's why Kelly can stipulate that that's where the main building is going to be, because that's where the existing median opening is.
Okay. Thoughts from the commission? Corral?
I appreciate staff's concern. I think they did a good job of, if they can stipulate to that, I don't have an issue with it. A year or two down the road, that 3 feet of landscaping for us to try and police and monitor that is really not going to happen. So I'd rather see it where it's at.
The applicant is?
Correct. I think we're getting, from the public's view, we're getting more landscaping than over by the park.
Which and that's why you made the comment, is what I asked for when we met over many months ago. That's the part that people are going to see. Those parking spots, I get why staff is insistent on the point, but that's, I mean, the scope of this project, what are we winning by doing that? It affects his building design, it could affect the ultimate final project in the whole scope of it, for a 3 foot strip of landscaping when they're going above and beyond in the other areas that really matter to me. Hall Avenue, College Avenue.
Mayor, I just think the fact that we're putting it out there allows us to hold their feet to the fire, so I'm glad that staff brings it up.
Yeah,
But
the staff's doing what the staff should do.
Right.
They do a great job. That's their job.
if we can get this in return, I think it's a
Other thoughts? Commissioner Dickman.
No, I agree with both of you. I think for that 3 feet, it just doesn't pay for us to demand it when you're doing everything else on the outer perimeter. As you said, years from now, we won't even remember that or even notice it.
You could stick 6 or 8 bushes in there. Frankly, they're not going to make it sitting next to hot engines of a car anyway, and we're not going to go back and say fix those or replace those bushes. That's the reality of what happens in those landscaping strips. I know, I'm pretty confident that the Howell and the college things would be maintained because we'll see them. Other thoughts?
I guess I agree. It's on the inside. I'm more concerned with it's ever visible from the outside, both landscape and building wise. It's the interior. Nobody's going to have any business in there unless they're paying customers.
Which leads me to item 6.
It does, although before we click away from this, I did just want to point out we accommodated staff's recommended condition. There is the Oak Creek sign that we've always talked about, but we also have a line. It's conceptual, of course, but that's where the easement will be. I think that's number 11C or something like that. But so we've added that. And down here, the 2 little arrows in the southwest corner of the site, that's pointing to where 2 existing billboards are on site that we will be removing. So hopefully, and of course, the donut hole in the middle that I call the wetlands, that's what we're working around.
Are you taking the 2 billboards that are on
our site, we're removing them.
That's a win. That's a huge win. Those are eyesores.
Thank you. One other thing too, that staff, as indicated, was able to work with us on the employee parking issue. This is a conceptual location. We know it's very close to the wetlands and the buffer, but we are trying to, and we did work with staff to add those spaces as well as the existing customer ones we've always talked about, our low anticipated traffic counts, but that's where we anticipate having some employee spaces inside the site. So with that, the visible perimeter, the pinkish hue, if you could go to the next either of the elevations. That's what we're trying to emphasize as far as when we talked last time about textured metal panels for the facade treatments, as well as brick, stone, and glazing. So what this is depicting is a new elevation, which is the corner building. And so if you can envision the Oak Creek sign and some landscaping, we have our stormwater pond right there. We did not add the color blue there, but that's where the stormwater pond. So the backdrop is this building that has kind of the 2 pillar ends and a single story that is all split face block and with a different material as the wainscoting, all on the preferred materials list of the city. We also have windows on the first floor. And you may recollect this was a little bit taller building in the prior concepts. The reality is, dealing with the 75% request in standard by staff, and where we were, which last month we were at 35%, we essentially had to shrink that building to make it smaller so that our percentage could go up. So the lighter yellow colors here, that is where the textured metal insulated panels are limited to on that main corner building. So again, I've heard a couple comments about what will people be looking at. We submit, and we do have the materials sample, that the textured metal insulated panel is a premium and a quality material. It's just not on the city's list. I used to have a paragraph in our submittal that tried to suggest that that could be added to that list, and we abandoned that effort. So we're acknowledging that the glazing, the glass, and the brick and the stone pillars are the only materials that qualify. And holistically, we're at 50%, or that's why we've suggested this standard should be 50%. I want Kelly to speak to it in just a minute, but Carrie, if you could please go to the other slide just to give another key visual. This is the building with the office. This is a true and usable two-story building, so it is taller. Again, we have the corner feature with the office, a lot of glazing. We have the brick pillars, and we have the wainscoting all the way around. This building used to have a center pillar and one on the end. Actually, I'm sorry, I pointed those incorrectly. It used to have 3 pillars, one midpoint here, one in the center where the building does notch, so that's a 2-sided pillar, and then one on the far end. So to boost our percentage, we've added 2 more pillars. That also makes the building look better, at least in my opinion. It breaks it up, and we've added a back pillar in the kind of interior of the site, but that will have a view corridor from College Avenue westbound.
So this is looking, if I was standing at the airport side of College Avenue, looking kind of southwest?
That's correct. You're standing right in front of all those mulch piles across the street in the city of Milwaukee, looking southwest at this shot. Kelly, did you want to speak to your design demands to the architect?
As always is the case for a developer, you end up with money being an issue. The previous design at its height was about 20 foot. We've reduced that down, as we've already explained. The cost of meeting the 75% rule was $265,000. So I decided to eat 100 of that to present before you what we have today. So I didn't go back to zero. I went to the numbers and said, look, let's come up to 50%, try to show and demonstrate a visually nice looking appearance for this product and that building, especially on that corner where the retention pond is. So I don't want it to be misunderstood that it was just it's this way or the highway. We did agree to spend an extra $100,000 out of the $265,000 that we were quoted on meeting that 75% level.
Questions from the commission? Mr. Krell.
I guess with the size of all these buildings to get that 75%, it seems like compared to other things, smaller buildings with 75%, where this 50% has a pretty dramatic effect on the physical appearance, in my opinion, because of the size of the entire project. So looking at with the added pillars where they went to, again, looking at the surrounding areas, I think it's a good addition to the area. And based on the size of the buildings, I think
it also, to me, is consistent with an airport area use, and that's kind of a building I would expect to see there. Whenever a applicant makes an effort to come up to whatever our number is, I appreciate that, and I understand it's money, and as the guy that's going to pay the bills, that's a big factor for you. But ultimately, I'm going to ask myself as a member of the Plan Commission, does this building add to that site and to the quality of things that we have in the city from an architectural standpoint, from a landscaping standpoint? And I look at this building, and it does. And I trust you on the landscaping for the Hall and College pieces, that will also represent what I was looking for when I first had the conversation with Brian. That's my expectation. It does allow us leeway as members of the Plan Commission to allow these reductions in percentages. To me, this meets the requirement. It's a good-looking building that does what we want it to do, satisfies your needs from a business owner's perspective, but also does all the other things that staff correctly points out. This isn't an indictment of staff. They're doing what they have to do. They push you to go from 35 to 50. That's a good thing. So that's a win for both of us.
They did, Mr. Mayor. In fact, when Matt talked to Kerry last week, we were at 37%, and staff did what they should have done, and that's when Kelly had to get out his checkbook, and we then had the architect figure out a way to really boost it to, we think, a good balance of what we can deliver on the site, but also where the location is. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Alderman Bekavich.
I guess I'm going to comment too on the brick. I'm kind of along the lines of Pat. Given the size of the building, try to hit that 75% for what the building actually is. I know it's our standard, but this is really a nice looking building for the location, in my opinion. I think adding the extra columns really helped break it up instead of just giving it that long wall look. I don't know how well anybody out there can see it, but they enhanced it with diamonds, and I would imagine that's brick, I hope. Or is that metal panel? The diamonds, they give it an accent within the walls that break it up, and then of course it's anchored by the glass cubes on the corner. You know, I'm finding it a pretty decent building, all things considered, for what the use actually is. So I'm pretty pleased with the conceptual drawings of this.
Other comments or questions? Commissioner Dickman.
I just want to point out that if we look at what we have here and some of the other self-storage buildings that we have in the city, there is no doubt that this is far and beyond, you know, what the other ones are. So I like the concept. I like what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree with the design. I think you did a fine job with it, and I think it'll be pleasant for the city.
Commissioner Chandler. Doug Seymour.
There's no doubt that within the universe of self-storage buildings in Oak Creek, and I dare say southeast Wisconsin, this is a great looking building. But that's not the universe that you're dealing with. You're dealing with the universe of the standards that are in Oak Creek, and the standard is for 75%. And certainly the Plan Commission has the discretion to vary that if there are extenuating circumstances. I guess I'm a little concerned, and again, nothing against the applicant and the strides that they've made, but to say that, I mean, as an applicant, you know, we're giving by bringing this up to 50% is a little bit misleading because the standard is 75%. So while I can appreciate certainly the economics of the situation, and you have to balance that, and we're totally cognizant of that, but it's not really a negotiation. I mean, it's something where we have a standard, and if someone's looking to vary from that standard, they better give you a pretty good reason to do that.
And I would think the applicant actually has provided some of the reasons why. It makes sense from, I think architecturally this does look good. I don't know whether you get it up to 75% or whatever. I don't know that it makes it look any better. And that is our discretion.
Yep, fair enough.
And at least from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's strong favorability towards making that allowance. Do you want to?
Yeah, just very quickly, Doug's 100% correct. I mean, we really shouldn't be looking at what we gave up, or what they gained, but what we gave up. And we did give up 25%, but when I look in the areas we did it, they're non-visible. What are we really going to gain by putting brick on the inside of this development? So I mean, they've covered all the visible areas, at least to my satisfaction. That was the give on my part. If this would have been more of, say, of an office use building, like a doctor's office or something, where you were going to have high traffic volumes day in and day out and a lot of foot traffic to the interior of it, I'd agree wholeheartedly. And I don't want to start watering down our standards, to say the least, because we've had some situations here with thickness of brick and things like that where we had to make exceptions, where we are already in. We already know what's coming. The only thing that makes a difference for me is that this is essentially landlocked just to the people that are paying customers to it. So that's all I have to say on that.
Mr. Chandler.
I have a question for Kerry. Just going back to the landscaping, is there a specific reason behind the interest elevations needing landscaping?
It's part of the standards. I'm not entirely certain that I understand the question, but it's essentially to ensure that we don't have an interior that's fully asphalt or concrete It's also, you know, part of making that entrance highly visible to customers, some kind of visual cue there. So there's a couple of reasons why we have that requirement. But that's also for all kinds of landscaping on the site, not just the entrance elevation portion.
Thank you.
Commissioner
And
Corral.
go ahead. A couple other questions. For the applicant, can you provide a little more information about this 50% change? Meaning, what was it originally? What materials are in question that don't bring you to the 75%, and that may be partly Carrie too?
Sure, I'll take the first attempt at that. And Matt, if you could get the materials board up here, just so if anyone wants to look. Essentially, and if we can use the screen again, and yeah, let's go to this one. The middle building previously had the textured metal paneling all in the upper level. We always had the wainscoting around the bottom, and with the brick pillars.
Did you first want to understand the 75% rule?
Well, we can start with that. Yeah, let's start with that. And then we'll go to
Then I'll defer to staff on that rule.
Yeah, the rule per section 17.1009 of the code with respect to our site plan and building plan review is that 75% of the visible perimeter of manufacturing buildings must be a minimum of 75% glass, brick, or decorative masonry. And the purpose behind that is whether it's the roadway elevation or the sides of the building that are typically seen from a roadway. I mean, that's get to Alderman Kavich's point. I mean, we really want to see the portions of the building that are visible to the general public and to the traveling public to pay attention and put the investment in high quality materials in those locations. I mean, in many cases, the back sides of the buildings won't meet that requirement, and that's okay, because that's not generally what's being seen by the general public. So the standard was, and now it's been the standard for quite some time now for manufacturing buildings, is to really pay attention to investing in the visible perimeter of those buildings as seen from the public right of way.
So is it the yellow part of the building that doesn't meet the requirement? The glass does.
Yeah, what has been described to me as the insulated metal panel is not an approved building material as a primary building material. Certainly, I mean, had they proposed to use that as an accent material for the 25% of that building, I mean, that would have been fine, but that's not the case.
Thank you. And now can you just give a little information on why you chose to not go with more brick or more glass to meet the 75%? Just a little more information.
I mean, it's the cost, essentially. This is a large building, and just to clarify, it's not an approved, the textured metal panels are not approved for this zoning district, but there are other zoning districts that it is allowed, to my understanding. But in this instance, we previously had much more metal paneling because that's a customary industry use for a large building like this. It's easy to put up, it's cost economical. But in this instance, then, because we have a corner site, we have a lot of building frontage. Doug was correct that it's what you can see from the public right away, which is why we did the other plan with the pink. We lost our screen, if anybody, there it is. This is the last iteration, yes, May 13, 2016, you can see up there. So this was our first attempt, and we had all metal paneling on the top with just a few of those pillars. So I'm trying to orient myself. This is the office building. This is the two-story office building portion, and the two-story building in that location with the one pillar in the middle and one pillar on the end. We've since added the pillars in those locations. This is the corner building, which when Carrie's able to flip back, you don't have to do it now, but this is all the preferred materials now. But this was previously, it's all the split block. So we only have the metal paneling on the tops of the window glazing areas. So we have the brick pillars, we have the split block, and then that's the other building we were just talking about with more vertical pillar elements in the preferred material, and the metal panelings are the yellow. I should say yellow is not going to be the post-construction color. That's not what we're doing. It's really just to illustrate. So as going back to that site plan, all of the purple, pink colors, that's what we are calculating all of those visible perimeter areas on based on 100%. The staff, the code standard is 75%. We're at 50. So to be honest, and Right. We started at 35% with those renderings that you just saw. And the reality is this building, Matt, do you have a guess? I'm guessing it's 80%. Because we have this big site, as I mentioned, corner lot, all these visible perimeters, but back to that one with all the split block in this area and just the metal panels on the tops of these little ends, my thinking is that's about 80%. We'd be happy to work with staff to give that percentage, but that's your money shot. This is where the main entrance is, the building everyone's going to look at, and that facade is all the preferred materials. This building is maybe 55%. I'm just trying to guesstimate there, but the reality is we do have large expanses of the metal panels which are textured on the top. It's not just the pre-stamp. So there's some texture, there's some architectural appeal to it, but it is 50% about the metal panels and ephes. There's a small ephes cornice on all of the buildings that is about 6% of the total facade. 100% is.
And so the building that's 20,513 square feet.
Correct.
That's the building with the windows?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's the
Just
one
the
you
corner
say
lot.
is roughly 80%.
Engineer, help me out. And there we are.
Right,
So
I guess we don't really know the numbers offhand. I think 80% is probably a very good estimate, but the key issue there is what you'll see from the intersection is all that split face block that's in the middle right behind the pond.
Doug?
Is that clear glazing or is that spandrel glass?
Sorry, you're asking what?
On the renderings you're showing glass there, is that clear glazing or is that spandrel glass? Kind of fake.
In the
fake glass?
past, I've only used spandrel.
What about the future?
Yeah, well,
Since I don't care about the past.
I would say right now we're going to maintain spandrel.
Right. Anything else down there?
Does that meet the requirement?
Well, I mean, typically, glass, in this instance, and certainly it's different, for instance, in Drexeltown Square, where we have a clear glazing requirement.
This is not Drexeltown.
This is not Drexeltown Square, obviously, but, I mean, if I think we would, at that point where we do see actual physical site and building plans, we would want to make sure and take a look to see that that makes sense versus, for instance, some additional masonry there, because I've seen in large expanses of spandrel can be pretty, probably not what was intended, let's say that, and it might be better off at that point to be more selective with your use of glass and make more of that masonry.
Yeah, if the commission decides to move this forward, there's still a lot of work to do with staff, because they don't just go away. There's still a lot of fine tuning that Doug just referred to. So, Commissioner Corral.
Just to reiterate to Doug and Carrie's point, again, the decision, I don't know about the economical argument, if that's what I'm basing it on. I'm looking at the size of the building, the amount that's actually there, and what's visible. And the other factor that I think we're looking at is the location in the city where it's going. It's a lot different than Drexeltown Square. It's not a TIF area. It's a pretty good looking building, and I think from the public's view, which is my concern is sitting here, we're going to get that visual of 75% plus. So again, I'm comfortable with it based on this building.
Ryan.
The glazing and brick is a huge improvement for the building. I do like the look of that. My struggle and concern with this is 50% of this primary exterior structure is not even a building material that is approved. And that's what I struggle with.
if I could just clarify, it's approved, it doesn't qualify as a preferred building material, as I understand the code. So it's not like it's deficient by way of fire inspection or other code uses. It's just not on the preferred list.
As a building material for the exterior.
For
So
more than
it's
25%.
a EIFS
Correct.
metal structure.
Correct. That's what the code says.
So 50% of this building is not a preferred material.
In this zoning code, yes. There are other codes where 100% of a metal building could be approved.
At Mill Creek.
Okay. Any other, Commissioner Dickman?
I just want to ask Doug, you used the term manufacturing buildings have to meet this requirement. This is considered a manufacturing building even though it's a self-storage facility because it's on the list under M1 or something?
That's correct.
Okay.
All right, so if there's nothing else on that one, go ahead. Then I'm going to move to these other items.
I'd just like a little more explanation from Brian. when he says it's not acceptable material. A little more detail as why it's not acceptable.
Just as our preferred material list, that material is not recognized in this category. It's a fine material. It's a building material. You can use it. No issue with that. Just in this instance as a perimeter facade of the building.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so in your handout, you highlighted a red line 2 items under other regulations related to occupancy permits.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, under 12B, previously we were seeking some changes, but we are able to accommodate the staff's proposal, which is that building permits shall be issued to both A and B, the larger buildings, prior to any building permits for the C buildings, the smaller ones. Actually, if you can bring up the site plan. The reason that's easy for us to accommodate is because we're going to pull building permits all at once. I think there was some question on whether we might just build the smaller ones in back, and none of those issues are really present. We'll be pulling building permits, so we don't propose a change to 12B. 12C, the staff report portion, this isn't actually in the draft conditions, but the staff report suggested 2 ways of handling that, or 2 provisions. Occupancy permits must be obtained for building B prior to the issuance of occupancy permits for any C1 buildings. So up on what we have, the graphic, B is the 2-story building with the office, and staff has grouped the 2 single-story buildings in back as C1 as designated. And then a sister provision under what I listed as C2, the same thing. Occupancy permits must be obtained for building A, the corner building, prior to any C2. In concept, we're fine with that because, again, we're pulling building permits for all at once, so we don't really have an A or a B which will come first. But as we explained last month, and Kelly can elaborate if needed, the building process for the smaller buildings will be much shorter. And so while these are underway and there's substantial interior finish work to be done, these are exterior load buildings. We'd like the opportunity to obtain a temporary occupancy, not even full occupancy, but temporary for these, as I indicated, with a change of up to 180 days preceding the larger buildings. And that's, again, just because of the interior finish work. Those buildings will be up, they'll be screening, and you won't be seeing through them to whatever's going on. But that's just a matter of how the business operates, and Kelly can speak to that. So again, we can work with this. We just need a little elbow room, as we previously indicated.
Staff, have we ever done anything like that?
I believe that temporary occupancy is not something that the inspection department actually does issue. Now, there have been exceptions to that, one being Drexel Town Square, and that's a whole other animal. So I don't feel entirely qualified to answer that question with complete confidence, but I believe that we don't issue temporary occupancy as a general rule. The other concern is that while we appreciate that all of the buildings will be requested for one building permit so that they're all requested, there is the concern that there have been building permits that have been issued with no building resulting from those building permits. So that is a concern. That's what we're trying to get at with these conditions as we proposed.
And just to be clear, the purpose behind those proposals is certainly you're being proposed some pretty good looking buildings, and I think we acknowledge that, that are form the basis, I imagine, for your consideration for approval of these conditions and restrictions. The one thing which we are very adamant about safeguarding the city from is being sold one product and then having someone come in and building the C buildings and then finding, whoa, that brick does cost a lot of money. I'm not going to build those buildings. So from that standpoint, I mean, we're going to be very adamant about making sure that buildings A and B be built at the same time or before you occupy buildings, the C buildings, which are the easiest to put up and probably the most economical to put up, but it's not something that, for instance, if you were proposing the C buildings for the entire site, we wouldn't even be here this evening because that wouldn't have even got past the staff recommendation. So I think, again, applaud the applicant for proposing structures which go above and beyond, again, within the universe of self-storage facilities. But we need to make sure that those buildings are built and that we're not facing even the remotest possible situation where we'd be looking at the C buildings without having A and B there in place.
Assistant Chief Kresick, and then I'm going to ask the applicant to respond to that.
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. I will comment somewhat for our inspection department from the fire department's experience with that. Temporary occupancies are not issued. Temporary occupancies may have been done in the past, but I'm not sure what the application was. Generally, it's a full occupancy or it's an occupancy of a portion of a structure. All rules and regulations related to the occupancy must be met before that occupancy permit is issued. So temporary occupancy, once again, without speaking for the City Inspection Bureau, temporary occupancy has not been applied.
Okay, thanks, Assistant Chief.
And I apologize if I may have sidetracked us with the phrase temporary occupancy. Each one of these buildings, to put another way, will be seeking a separate occupancy certificate for all of them. And by the way, all the site work will be done. So I think staff is doing a diligent job in, as Doug said, making sure they're not sold a bill of goods. But in this instance, the facts will be all building permits will be pulled at the same time. The site work will be done, so we would not even be able to obtain an individual occupancy certificate for a C1 if this is gravel, if this is not done. We have our stormwater that we have to put in, we have to do the wetlands barriers, and we will have had to pull building permits already on those. And so the reality is we're going to start, we're going to be proceeding, and I think we're well aware of what the obligations would be, and we won't start this project if we can't fulfill it and do those two buildings. And earlier I did see the city attorney was here. I mean, the city would have enforcement rights on things, but that's not going to be a situation here because Mr. Gallagher is looking forward to doing his first project in Wisconsin. This is the one he's excited about to proceed with, and we've put a lot of effort into making this work. So I think those are well-founded concerns, but we think that this is an excellent compromise of balancing both of those interests.
This is one of those things where after I hear the explanation, I'm more confused than when I started the discussion. So what are you telling me with the two red line statements?
So what we'd like to propose is the way the customers work is not everybody wants a climate controlled unit. Many of them would prefer to drive up right next to their unit, which is what the building Cs represent. So what we're trying to do, as Doug has characterized it correctly, is the C buildings can be done much quicker than A and B. I don't want to be inhibited from being able to rent a unit in a C building, but for waiting for the C of O for A and B. So we have tried to compromise by stating, I think we're at 180 days, that if we don't have, well, you state the
right here. We'd have to obtain the bigger building C of O within 180 days, or we'd lose the occupancy for the C1 building or the C2.
What about the notion that Doug raised about standards being changed? And is that kind of what you were saying in that interim, or were we worried about standards or design materials changing?
No, I think that the concern is that, and quite frankly, I mean, just because you pull a building permit does not obligate you to actually physically construct the building. So, I mean, our concern again is we as a staff, as a community, wouldn't feel it would be appropriate, and I would hope that the commission would feel the same way, that, for instance, if all we had at that site were the C buildings, and I know the applicant isn't proposing that, but we just want language in there to make sure that doesn't happen. Something, things could change tomorrow and this could be sold to another developer. And I hope that's not the case, but we need language in there to make it very clear that without the A and B buildings, you aren't getting the C buildings.
Understand Doug's point?
Yeah, we do. And the reason why we are requesting for that 180 day is for the following. Number one is I really can't go sell a partial building. No one's going to buy it today. So understanding his concern that left with the pig and a poke here for the city of Oak Creek, not going to be what you want, then impose penalties on me that are restrictive in the nature that will abuse me of my own accord. Because if I can open up C1 and C2 buildings so that I can rent them while I'm finishing A and B, then if I don't get the job done in that 180 days, then penalize me. I deserve it. I'm more than happy to accept that. But don't penalize me from the beginning.
what recourse do we have, or the city have, to their proposal of 180 days, they lose a C occupancy? Do we even have the ability to restrict that or retro? Because I mean, I understand the dilemma, but I need to know what the city can really do.
Sure, and certainly this is something for the city attorney to weigh in, but it's my understanding that, occupancy signals that the building meets all the codes, is occupiable per life safety, what have you. I think we'd have a hard time pulling occupancy on a building because another one's not done. I think that there's some issues there. From the standpoint, we feel that there's adequate protection there if just having the building permit language in there. Certainly the most complete thing you could do is tie it to occupancy, but if you tie the building permits for C1 to become after the bill or concurrent with the building permits for A and B, we're taking somewhat of a leap of faith there that they're going to follow through and construct what they've got permits for, at which point we're not having any restriction on occupancy. When the buildings are occupiable, that's when they get occupancy.
So Doug, but you're saying, so other than, besides occupancy, there's no recourse that we can put in based on that to hold these?
No, there is, and
that's what we need.
The recourse is that the city can take steps to revoke the conditional use permit.
Well, then, if that's what we have to do, that forces their hand, then we've got a comfort level. I get the economics of what he's trying to do and how it's going to rent. I understand all that, but we need some. He flips it, the next guy doesn't want to do it, whatever. Not that you're going to do that, but there's a lot of options there. If we've got that ability, that's what we should be looking at.
Okay.
I have a question of why you picked 180 days. Why wasn't it 90 days or 300 days?
What's the relevance of 180 days?
You know what? No rhyme or reason. We just figured, look, let's pick a number that is going to be comfortable in the sense that from past experience, if for some reason building A and B is struggling to get permit because the horn strobes required are not made anymore or some other issue, we've all been down that road and suddenly, wait a minute, we still can't open up C and it's been 90 days, all but for waiting for some product to be approved or something of that case. So we arbitrarily, from historical experience, said 180. If you guys feel better at 150, I'll agree to 150 right here tonight.
Well, we're always going to pick the lower numbers. So. Thanks for offering the 30 days.
And I would submit that 12B could be added, building permits must be issued, and buildings be constructed. I heard that staff concern as well. We're going to give you the bill of goods that we're offering.
Staff is nodding yes to that.
Honestly, I think that's what we want to see. I really don't want to even mess with, different timelines for occupancy. As long as, our intent obviously is to get the buildings up and if the buildings are constructed, if the for A and B prior to occupancy for C1, that's what we're looking for.
Okay.
And if you choose not to occupy those, that's your problem.
Under construction.
No, he just said completed. That goes against the whole premise.
Right. I was suggesting that building permits be issued and be under construction, if that's further belt and suspenders to protect the city. The whole issue of occupancy.
Doug's nodded yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything further on 4A? If none, no questions, motion on 4A.
David will make a motion that the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council adopt the conditions and restrictions proposed by the staff as part of the conditional use permit, allowing a self-storage facility on the properties at 6304, 6340 South Howell Avenue, and 137, 147, and 209 East College Avenue after a public hearing subject to conditions and restrictions.
Can I just clarify? I want to make sure that we get the exact conditions and restrictions that the Plan Commission is forwarding to the council. So I just want to make sure that we are accepting the changes as proposed by the applicant for 5D, 6C, and then as discussed with the amendment to 12B to include buildings under construction. Is that correct? Am I understanding the Plan Commission's wishes correctly?
Yes, that motion would include the language that Carrie just included.
Okay, need a second.
Dickman will second.
Dickman seconds, roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, no.
Grillo, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seibert, aye.
Chandler, no.
All right, good luck, gentlemen. All right, 1 down, 9 to go. Under new business, let's pick up the pace, because otherwise we're going to be here till 4:30, so I don't want to be here till 4:30. Under 5A, new business is a plan review of site and building plans submitted by Matthew Lyons, Azura, for modifications to the approved site and building plans for community-based residential facility on the property at 8760 South Mayhew Drive, tax key number to be determined. Carrie.
I'll do that again. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Nice. So this is a request for site and building modifications, and these were from plans that were approved by the Plan Commission in 2015. Now, back in 2015, the applicant had proposed a single building in a 2-phase development. Phase 1 had a single-story, 28,900 square foot building, 40 residence rooms with that were broken down, 38 single occupancy, 2 double, so for a total of 44 beds with various other amenities and rooms. With the potential for a phase 2, which was shown in concept on the eastern portion of the property, an approximate 10,370 square foot building that would provide an additional 20 units and 22 beds. Now, what they're proposing now, instead of doing a 2-phased approach, is do a single phase, 2 buildings that are each just under 14,000 square feet, with a total of 20 resident rooms that would be broken down into 16 single occupancy and 4 double occupancy in each building, for a total of 48 beds on the entire premises. There haven't been any changes to the access points from the originally proposed plans and approved plans. However, parking has been reconfigured, and in the plans that are actually on the screen now, I apologize that there were a few versions that were floating around before. What is proposed now, they have included a couple of extra parking stalls, so that's raised the number to meet the minimum required. That has been an update since the staff report was drafted. They've also had a reduction in peak staff from 18 to 15 with the reconfiguration of the plans in the buildings. They've also changed the elevations slightly. West elevations of each building show garage doors to provide access to receiving areas. One thing you should note is that although the garage doors appear to be designed to contribute to the residential character of the buildings, they are fronting on the public street, and that's a difference from the original plans. And additional information on the design of these garage doors is something that should be provided to the Plan Commission's satisfaction. But the proposed building materials that have changed just slightly in terms of percentages. Fiber cement siding is still proposed on the building with some brick accents. Now, just as a reminder, fiber cement as a primary building material does need to be approved by a 3/4 majority of the Plan Commission. There are stone veneer accents at the west entrance courtyard, and there are columns on the south building that incorporate stone. There is no stone veneer proposed for the north building, however. The stone is all in the south. And staff believes that there's an opportunity to provide some similar stone accents on the entry portion of the building on the north as well, so that we have some kind of continuity between the 2 building designs. Both use architectural shingles and standing seam roofs, and per code, a minimum of 65% of the surface of the total exterior wall area of multifamily residential buildings must be brick or decorative masonry. So it'll be up to the Plan Commission to determine whether the use of fiber cement meets this minimum requirement, as well as for the masonry material. Landscape plans have also been provided. There may be some slight changes that would need to be made. We do also need details for the decorative aluminum fencing, although I'm told it's no different from what was approved in the previous plans. Mechanicals are not shown on the buildings. However, wherever they are, they must be screened either through architectural components or vegetative screening or fencing that would have to be approved by either Plan Commission or designated to staff. Details for the proposed dumpster enclosure, the location, both have not changed. But we will need to make sure that those are in the full submitted plans before building permits are issued. Before I conclude, I just want to say that the applicant is here, and the applicant has requested to give a presentation. But the staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Matthew Lyons of Azura for the property at 8760 South Mayhew Drive, subject to conditions 1 through 8, and I will now defer to the applicant for his presentation.
How long is your presentation? Good. Hit the highlights.
Yes. My name is Matt Lyons. I'm currently somewhat homeless. I'm in the process of moving to Wisconsin, but my official address is 13451 West Wesley Avenue, Lakewood, Colorado. Do you want to drive? Okay. So I think most of you have heard about Azura before, so I'll just kind of pass over this. But we pride ourselves on our mission is to transform the culture of care. We do memory care, assisted living, so it's assisted living for those with Alzheimer's and dementia. We are recognized within the state as one of the leading providers for Alzheimer's care, and really strive to provide the best environment for our residents. And so the changes that have been made to these plans are essentially the next iteration of what we feel is kind of the cutting edge of design memory care assisted living, and so that's what the intent is here. And you can go ahead and skip through this. So the approved development it was approved by Plan Commission and Common Council previously. There's conditions and restrictions that were approved and executed on January 19th of 2016. The approved development, as Carrie mentioned, was 27 units per acre, with 69 total units between the two phases on the 2.5 acres. Currently, we got an extension to be able to start construction as soon as December 31st, 2016 under the existing approval. The parking requirements were approved at essentially nursing home standards, which would allow 1 space per 3 beds plus the peak shift. And then approval was granted previously by both the Plan Commission and the Common Council for 26% of the total facade to be masonry and glass, with the remaining 74% being the fiber cement product. So that's what was approved before. Here's kind of a before and after showing the overall site plan. As Carrie mentioned, the parking layout was changed, and that was just to keep consistent with the parking ratios because we reduced the number of units. The intent here is we removed the spaces that would be having headlights facing into resident rooms when people pulled in. So by changing this site plan, we actually make it more beneficial for our residents. They don't have headlights going into their rooms. That was really the only change here, other than separating the two buildings. We believe in providing the most residential and most normal environment for our residents as absolutely possible. And our intent is to make these buildings look like 2 individual houses, not an assisted living facility. So that's the intent. The top elevation here is what was approved originally. That was kind of our first step into making it look residential. The intent was to have kind of a townhome look, but it was still one large residential building. And if you're looking at the building from Mayhew Drive, you're going to see one long expanse of an assisted living building. Whereas now with the 2 separate buildings, and Carrie, I'm not sure which elevations you were looking at. We do have brick on the facade of the building that would be to the south, and stone proposed on the building that would be to the north. So the elevations that would be facing Mayhew Drive are have a larger extent of masonry or stone surfaces.
That was to her point that she made during her.
Correct, yeah. And then the 2 buildings are exactly the same as far as footprint goes. Well, there's some small differences, but for all intents and purposes are exactly the same. If we can stay on the previous slide for 1 second. What we've done is done hip roofs on one and gable roofs on the other, and change of color and some materials to make them look like 2 separate houses that would be on a site, as opposed to one large expanse of a building. The garages actually lend to that residential look and feel. Those were intentionally placed on the front, but they actually provide a way for goods and services to very quickly be brought into a receiving area, and those trucks to be brought away, as opposed to having trucks sitting outside for a longer period of time and shuttling goods into the building through an access door.
So you're going to supply it through the front versus disturbing all the residents in the back with a truck unloading.
Exactly. Yeah. And so here, before and after, as far as approved versus the current plans, it was 66 units before, 40 total units now. As Carrie mentioned, the number of residents are slightly higher than that due to a couple of potential double occupancy units. We were at one building with 28,500 square feet. We're now at two with about 1,000 square feet less, which is just removing some kind of central common areas. Our staffing gets more efficient by doing that. The staffing or the parking ratio actually increased slightly per total unit. And then the facade actually increased as well. So whereas on the total building, not just the facade or the Mayhew facing portion of the building, the total building was 26% glazing and masonry/stone. It's now 34%, and then the fiber cement amounts decreased from 74% to 66%. So actually an improvement over what was previously approved by both the Plan Commission and Common Council.
If I could just make one point of clarification.
Sure.
I think the north building, what I meant to say, if I said brick, I misspoke. I meant to say stone.
Right, yeah, the north building has stone and the south building has brick.
And I think what we were trying to say is to try and incorporate some of the stone elements so that both buildings had the same kind of entrance feel.
Yeah, and we're intentionally trying to differentiate them is the difference.
He's trying to make it, to his comments, he's trying to make like two different.
Yeah.
Doug.
And I certainly understand and appreciate that, but also I recognize your desire to make that residential looking, and I think the buildings look nice, but I think also you are part of a neighborhood which is not necessarily residential, and part of your neighbors have incorporated more of that stone accents into their buildings, and merely a suggestion, Plan Commission, take it or leave it, but we feel we actually really loved the elevation that had kind of that stone enclosure around the front entrance and that kind of knee wall, and thought that was a nice unifying factor. I mean, these buildings don't have to be clones of each other, but we felt that was a great street presence for both those buildings.
Comments?
Applicant have thoughts on that?
I mean, my preference would be to leave it as is, just based on our total intent. If it's a requirement, we can definitely talk about that. But our intent is to make them look as different as possible. There are brick accents on some of the buildings around, and there are stone accents on others. We don't feel like the brick or the stone would be out of place, and they both meet the preferred building materials per the city code.
Okay. Mr. Chandler?
So why was there actual material change versus what was used initially?
Again, it was just the intent to try and make the buildings look different, and to really what we're trying to avoid is looking like an expansive assisted living facility. I mean, we are what we are, but we try our culture from operations all the way through building is to provide a home-like experience and to be as close to home as possible. And you don't generally have two homes that are right next to each other that are identical looking. And so we're trying to differentiate them as much as possible.
Okay. And also, where are the mechanicals stored? We didn't have any information on mechanicals.
Yeah, I mean, there are some residential air conditioner units that would be screened in the landscaping. There are some slightly larger mechanical units. We do a VRF system, which those would be on the back of the building, which would not be viewed from the parking lots or the street for the most part. And then there are mechanical rooms that are in the quote-unquote garage areas. They're mechanical rooms, but it's in the area that would look like a garage from the exterior. But yes, our intent is for all of those to be screened.
So are those the two areas with the garage doors on them? Are those the mechanical rooms?
How do you want me to? I don't have a. Here we go. So if you look at the plan, so the garage frontages would be here and here. You can see the driveways into those areas.
She's highlighting it on your screen now.
Thank you.
Oh. Yep. So there and there would be, those would be the garage areas. The areas where mechanicals would be would most likely, the larger VRF condenser units would be here and here. And then there would be some residential style air conditioner compressor units that would most likely be in this area and in this area that would be screened by the landscaping. And those are literally the 3 foot tall, what you have at your house type of air conditioner unit.
Thank you.
Commissioner Dickman.
Okay, in your commentary, Carrie, you talked about the garages and how it was changed, and they were now facing the road. And you mentioned that there would be additional information, the design should be provided to the commission. What did you expect there? And I saw nothing in the staff recommendations, anything about materials or anything regarding the garage doors.
Sure, and that's just something that we would want to make sure that we have for the Plan Commission. So I'm going to defer to the applicant, but it would be materials that we'd be looking for. We'd be looking for colors, how that relates to the other residential buildings that are in the neighborhood, and how it relates to the street.
Yeah, and we would provide a quality insulated garage door with a quality material with a color and intent to fit the overall design of the building. If the Plan Commission is comfortable with it, we'd be more than happy to work with staff to get something that staff is comfortable with prior to building permits, but would prefer to do it through staff if the Plan Commission is comfortable with it just from a timing perspective.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. What's between the two buildings? It looks like you've got a sidewalk or whatever. Can you give a little explanation as to what?
Sure. Yeah, this has been a conversation with Assistant Chief Kresick. So the fire department has requested an access drive between the two buildings. Obviously, we're trying to provide as residential as possible a feel. And so what we've agreed upon is approximately 5 to 6 foot sidewalk that would run between the two buildings. And then the shaded area around those is a material that allows grass to grow through it, but it actually has engineering capabilities to allow a fire truck to drive on it. The fire department has seen and approved this material, and that's what we're proposing. And then the rest of it is just walkways and kind of a courtyard area. It'll really be there will likely be some of our mechanicals will be in there and will be screened by the landscaping, and it won't be a highly used area. But we did intend to keep that as residential looking as possible.
Quick question also, why did you put the garages in front?
Again, it was trying to make it look as residential as possible. Those garages look like the front of any house that you would see in any residential area. And I understand the staff's point that there are non-residential uses around here, but with the design and the materials that we're using, we feel that they fit in the area. And again, just really just to give the residential look is why the garages are where they are. And I should say garage doors because they're not technically garages. There are other things going on behind those that are not, it's not just a garage space.
I don't anticipate you'd be leaving those doors open very often.
No, sir.
Anything else? Alderman Bekavich?
Real quickly, I mean, splitting of buildings, I actually kind of like it. I think does give it a softer look, the whole deal. As far as the garage doors goes, so deliveries will come through those?
Yeah, and we don't have, large deliveries or anything like that. I mean,
it's something like a laundry truck, like a cube truck?
No, we do all of our laundry internal. It's, food deliveries, toiletries, things along those lines. We have, they're kind of small to mid-sized delivery trucks. They're not semis or anything along those lines, and they're generally in and out in, maximum of probably 20 minutes or so.
You touched on it. You've been over this with the fire department as far as accessibility points, all that stuff. Mike, you're good with the new design versus what you had, because we had accessibility issues with the last incarnation of this deal, didn't we?
Mike Kresick, Fire Department. I'm sure Mr. Lyons is done listening to me talk about access to his facility. When they say they want to maintain a park-like setting, they truly meant it, and they came up with a very unique situation for allowing us access. When they went to the split building design, and they arranged the concentration of patients, it kind of modified the way we would access those areas during larger scale incidents. We needed to develop a way to get access to a greater portion of where the patients might be residing. The solution presented here is acceptable to the fire department. We feel that this will be a fine product and will allow us the access we need.
Thank you. And then I guess regarding the brick versus stone, I guess it does give a distinction to the building, and I don't know, maybe the fiber siding is going to be a different color versus the other building. So if somebody's coming to visit somebody, they can get clear directions, go to the one with stone versus brick. I guess I have no preference, and I just, good luck to you, but I hope I don't live there. So
I may get there.
Didn't think you were going there, Dan.
No, I know. It's a necessary evil in today's society.
It's a good
Again,
thing. It's a good thing.
It's a nice looking facility, and I applaud you for that. Much better than what they used to be.
All right, any special language you would need in a motion for this thing? All right. Go ahead. Commissioner Dickman.
I just added in number 9, Carrie, just that the garage door material should be provided to the planning department.
I'm not even sure we need that because we have number 2 that says all revised plans, which includes site building, landscaping. So I think we're good with just that.
You're good?
Yep.
Okay. Motion.
Correll moves that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Matthew Lyons Azura for the property at 8760 South Mayhew Drive with the following conditions. 1, that the exterior stone and brick veneer meets the minimum 4-inch thick requirement per code. 2, that all revised plans, site, building, landscaping, lighting, details, etc. are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 3, that all mechanical equipment, ground, building, and rooftop is screened from view. That all building and 4, that all building and fire codes are met. 5, that stormwater and grading plans are submitted for final approval by the engineering department prior to issuance of permits. 6, that final lighting plans indicating luminaire type, pole type, color, and height are submitted for final approval by the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits. 7, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. And 8, that detailed landscaping plans are submitted for review and approval by the Director of Community Development prior to the issuance of building permits.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
David Chai.
Speedy, aye.
Correll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
What's your timeline?
We're hoping to break ground in October.
Excellent. Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, we're picking up the pace. 5B is a sign plan review submitted by Blair Williams. Blair Williams, how are you? Good to see you. Wired properties for the commercial portions of the mixed-use buildings at 7979 South Main Street and 7978 South Main Street. Tax key numbers 813-9053 and 813-9050. Doug?
Sure. Maybe just to preface this item as it comes first on the agenda prior to some individual sign plan reviews for several of the buildings or tenants in the Main Street buildings. When the Plan Commission first approved the site and building plans for these 2 Main Street buildings, then known as Main Street East and Main Street West, they did so with kind of a placeholder for signs. I mean, we had some signage shown with some signage banned, but we didn't necessarily approve specific tenant signage. And typically when the Plan Commission approves plans for multi-tenant buildings, they do require what is called a planned sign program. So we have some, at least, idea about what the individual tenant signage will look like, and it gives some continuity to the building and to the signage, and it just allows for a more thorough basis for staff's review of that signage to see whether it meets that overall sign plan. For some reason, we did not have that as of the point when we first started reviewing some of the individual tenant signage for these buildings. They feel it's a very important plan in that it really provides the tenants some guidance over and above the signage guidelines in the PUD, and they are extensive, and we do have some pretty prescriptive signage guidelines there. But it's really that they're guidelines, and as they apply to specific tenant spaces in these specific buildings, I mean there still is quite a bit of leeway and room for interpretation. As we move forward, we feel that it's in the best interest of both the building owner, the city, and the tenants to have a little bit more direction with respect to what exactly is the expectation for tenant signage in these buildings and the 3 buildings that will follow in a few weeks. So we felt that it was important to have that discussion. I think Blair has done similar things in Mequon in terms of not necessarily stifling the creativity of individual tenants, but having kind of a uniform palette for the signage to take place on the building. That's something that we'd like to do. Not necessarily, we don't necessarily have to approve that plan tonight. What was presented to you as far as the Mequon agreement merely goes to show that these are some of the types of things that we would incorporate into a planned sign programs for the two buildings, the Forge and the Flair apartments. I guess they're still the Main Street and East and West buildings, but recognizing that the sign plans that follow for the individual tenant spaces for both the Chocolate Factory as well as Bel Air Cantina can very easily fit into what we anticipate this planned sign program to be.
Blair, what say you?
Blair Williams, president of Wired Properties, 2022 East North Avenue, Milwaukee. Yeah, I think the point of this was to just start the conversation, and if the conversation goes the way I think it will, what I'd like to do is work with staff, excuse me, to finalize the signage criteria. As owner and developer, I think the things we're most interested in are kind of three things. One, we do believe that our retailers should have the ability to express their brand. It's their business. They've worked hard to create those brands, and we believe it's important that they have the ability to do that. The limitations on that should be those considerations that should be important to both the city and to the owners of these buildings. First and foremost, that we not go hog wild in that signage and give them free rein to express their brand wherever it is they'd like to establish physical locations on the buildings that are, excuse me, not tightly defined in the sense that it limits them, but tightly defined in the sense that it creates a measure of uniformity across the building. So, for example, if we were to establish a line at a vertical position upward on the building where the signage band may be, all signs located in that fascia should be centered along that line. So it ensures that the signs are all on a line across the building. To ensure that the signs don't exceed certain sign size limitations. So establishing a height limitation for the signs. We also want to be very careful as to the specific nature of the signs that we allow. For example, we would not be comfortable with a backlit box sign in which logos and letters are imprinted on a piece of plexiglass that's backlit in order to create those signs. We also are sensitive to the number of penetrations that may occur through our masonry buildings. As an example, Bel Air Cantina plus the bowl happens to be 14 individual letters or items. At 3 penetrations per, that would be 42 drilled penetrations through our masonry. We think that's excessive. If, heaven forbid, Bel Air Cantina were to go away and a restaurant named Joe were to go in place of it, we would have a significant number of holes to try to patch and fill. So we do suggest that a channel system to hold the letters and to hold the signs in place is an appropriate methodology, provided, of course, that that channel be color matched to the best extent possible to the underlying masonry. Those types of items are the things that we think are most important. There are a couple other things that may show up in that signage criteria. As an example, the opportunity to use blade signs. We like blade signs. We don't like blade signs and fascia signs for each tenant. We think that starts to crowd the visual realm, and we want pedestrians to understand who's where. We've often given the opportunity for folks to have a blade sign or a fascia sign and allow the tenant to decide which is more appropriate. On end cap conditions, we believe it may be appropriate to allow both fascia and blade signs because of the nature of the elevations that those retailers present to the world. Another important point would be that we have parking lots behind our buildings. It's very important that the public know where the retailers are on the other sides of the buildings, so signage on both sides of the buildings. So the intent of the signage criteria is to establish quantitative metrics whereby the planning department can easily and effectively, and you as a commission can easily and effectively determine whether or not the signage meets the criteria, and you can provide a yes or no answer based upon those criteria.
You're trying to make our life easier.
That's really what I'm trying to do. Here to serve.
Staff, is that the way you see it? See how easy this is? Questions from the commission? Alderman Bekavitz?
No, I like it. Makes sense to me. Again, thank you for the consideration of front and back, because you do have parking on the back, and we've struggled with that in the past. And I'm one that says you almost got to take each sign at its own. I think it makes sense. The signs can look somewhat different, but they should be uniform at the same time, if that makes any sense. So, I like the path it's going down.
We'll tell you that one of the big questions is, when are all these restaurants going to be open?
We're working very, very hard, as are they. I won't make a projection today, but we hope to be making an announcement soon on a couple of them. Bel Air Cantina is off to the races with their build-out with the Western building called Forge. Pizza Man has also started to work on theirs. Chocolate Factory is working on theirs. So those three are all in course. We believe that in August we should start seeing more activity.
Good. And totally unrelated, but I spoke to the Delco retirees yesterday, and I mentioned your large picture murals.
Mm-hmm.
They were very enthusiastic.
Well, we'll be sure to have an event then to
Because
bring
they want
them
to come
in.
out and see them. So
Yeah, get some pictures with them in front of the.
yeah, many
historic
of these
images.
folks worked there for like 30 years. They're really excited about that, and hopefully they can see some of their pictures in there.
Great.
Questions?
If I may ask one question, my hope is you have a couple of signs on your agenda tonight, and what I would hope is that we could work with staff on this criteria, get through it promptly. I think you know now what the intent of it is. Hopefully, staff, using their judgment, can determine whether it's appropriate. And then what I'd like to do is, if we can get that done quickly, then staff can start processing these signage requests.
Staff has indicated a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Other questions? Commissioner Siebert.
Yeah, does the staff feel comfortable with this signage that Mequon has?
Well, what we've said in the staff report, and what I think is very true, and we've said here, is that we're using Mequon as a basis, kind of a jumping off point. There are going to need to be some changes to what Mequon has to comply with what we have for DTS. So while we're comfortable using it as a template, it necessarily will have to have some differences from that signage plan.
And we agree wholeheartedly with that. Mequon was its own case. Town center district zoning, it was kind of a first blush at it there. Here we have a PDD that actually establishes standards that we can refer to.
And would this signage then apply to all of the Main Street Drexel Town Square?
Main Street buildings. So
Building.
it would be specified for these two buildings, and possibly even for the next iteration or the next submission for the B and C buildings, as they're called.
Yeah, we in a conversation with staff today, what I think we mutually agreed on was that we would take this plan and use it as a baseline in creating a signage plan for the buildings that we'll be presenting to you at the next Planning Commission meeting for both the B and C parcels.
Well, staff will then modify this plan to fit our requirements.
Yes, we will work
and
with.
then present it to the Planning Commission?
Yes.
Okay, so tonight this is just a kind of an advice?
Yes.
Okay.
You're not asking for a motion and approval?
No.
Well, this is a recommendation, but
Okay.
to my question is that right behind us are some signs.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we're all seem to be comfortable with what we're doing, and staff's working with it. I just don't know why we're even looking at these individually. I mean, not that, I know they all come before us, but it seems a little.
We had a little bit of a chicken and egg situation
Yeah.
here, but recognizing that these tenants are kind of on a schedule and they want to get going,
Oh,
and we want to make sure that
I
they
get that.
going.
I'm saying, I don't know, I mean, there's.
If I may make just a suggestion,
Work with staff on that.
one thought may be that you could, if you agree that their signs are appropriate, you could provide, I think, conditional approval. The condition being that the signs are in compliance with the signage plan to be mutually agreed upon
Yeah,
by
my point
with
is I'm
staff.
completely comfortable with that, just looking at where we're at. We've agreed in principle, and now they're coming at us. It just seems like we're redundant. I'm willing to let staff look at all of these if they meet that standard.
I sense the meeting being shortened.
Well, I'm just saying it just, I mean, if it fits that criteria that they've already laid out.
There are still some requirements for Plan Commission to approve signage for the PUD, but I get your point, and I
Yeah,
appreciate
let's not
it.
beat it to death if we know where we're going.
Right. And I like the signs as presented in the packets.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnston?
I believe the PUD spells out very specifically what the signs are allowed. That's going to change this MEC 1 standard quite a bit to meet the DTS one. Correct me if I'm wrong, the big things are the connections to the building and the logos that are different from the PUD. And those are the big items that we have.
There were a few other items in MEC 1s that don't necessarily correspond with the DTS PUD. I I can't recall what they are off the top of my head. It's been a couple of days since I reviewed those, but there are some major differences, and yes, they will be definitely based on DTS criteria.
So other than talking about it, there's no action you're
No
requiring?
action.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Are you talking about the next one, or is somebody else going to deal with that?
That's not my dog.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move to 5D. Thanks, Blair. 5D is sign plan review submitted by Valera Smokefin.
No, you're skipping over Bel Air.
Review of proposed sign plan submitted by Scott Johnson. Bel Air for the Bel Air Cantina Commercial Tenant Portion Building at 7979 South Main Street. Tax key number 813-9053.
So this is the sign plan review for Bel Air Cantina.
Yep.
And they are proposing one sign on the south elevation. With the discussion that we just had, of course, now there's probably going to be a couple of changes. Yes, these are individually mounted channel letters, so there'll probably be something that we'll have to change in order to accommodate the requirement for raceway. However, the location, the height, the elements are all in compliance with the DTS MUPDD, and staff has recommended approval of those with one condition that a permit application for the sign is submitted to the inspection department.
You're cool with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Questions?
And he meets the one change that we just agreed to, that it's not individually mounted.
Actually, yes. And to go back to the MEC one, we did a Collectivo coffee up there, and we actually designed the mounting system for these backlit systems that has like an underscore line that these letters are then pin mounted vertically. So it still allows for a backlighting instead of a traditional face lit generic channel letter. I'm sorry, Michael DeLugi, Sign Effects, 1827 West Glendale, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53209. So we've designed that system, and per my conversations with Mr. Phelan within the last couple of days, we've already started adding that element to this. So it was something that was going to be addressed by me tonight anyway.
So with that change, the height, the placement, we're all comfortable with that?
It shouldn't change any of the actual dimensions of the sign, if I'm
not.
correct. So the height is still appropriate at I think it's at 25 inches tall. The bowl is the bowl was reduced to 25 inches, so the overall square footage is 30.5 square feet. The bowl is about 3.5 feet tall. So we believe that this proposed sign is proportionate to the elevation on which it's on the south elevation on which it's proposed, and the requirement for the mounting is not going to change the aesthetic or the size.
The only one thing, and I don't mean to interrupt, but it will change the aesthetic slightly because there will be a underscore bar underneath it that will also reflect that backlighting type look. So Cantina will move up a little bit to still center it on the bowl logo, but it won't increase the square footage at all. It's an actual very nice aesthetic piece, and my conversations with Scott Johnson, the owner of Bel Air, he was all in favor and actually liked it better.
We'll need to see what those revisions look like.
Other questions or comments? Alderman Bekavich.
Quick comment. I think that's a fair trade-off, really. You get the letters, you get the raceway, and again, the mounting ain't so intrusive into the masonry. So I like it. Looks good.
Thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Siepert and then Commissioner Chandler.
Okay, I just have a question. Is this going to be the only sign that you're going to have on the building for this?
No, we've been having conversations, and going back to, again, what Mr. Williams said was they would like a sign on 6th Street because they are a corner entity, and they would also like an element on back towards the parking lot. But unfortunately, none of those fit into the actual criteria that we've discussed as to an actual blade sign because they have this very beautiful pergola system back there. So there's nowhere to actually mount a blade sign. So what we're looking to do is get these in place for their opening and for advertising, and then work through the variance process to allow something that staff and I have been working together with as far as placement and size that would be appropriate to mount to the pergola system that would be very similar to the blade system that's preferred for this development. So we'll be coming back to that process.
More to come.
Only one sign on the building itself.
Only one sign on the building, then we're looking at two
then-
pergola signs on the back, one facing the parking lot and one facing 6th. Correct.
Okay.
Commissioner Chandler.
Can you provide a little more information on how these signs are mounted?
How they're going to be the new system?
Yes.
Or how they're mounted, what we
New
original-
system, the
the
one
new
you're gonna
system.
use
Okay.
here.
The underscore or the underline under the letters that's not shown on this here is going to be mounted using either 1, 2, or 3 actual mounting plates against the brick. So they'll only have that penetration. The underscore will work as a wire raceway, so all of the electrical will come down into that, be a single penetration, 1 for Bel Air, 1 for Cantina, 1 for the Bull. So you only have 3 through and through penetrations into the building for electrical. All of the main power supply and everything will be connected on the back. Then the individual letters will stand up on this underline. So there'll be a 2.5-inch space between the back of the letter and the wall where it's standing vertically on a pin. And then the halo lighting of the LED will shine back onto the building and glow around the individual letters so the face does not light. So you're actually going to read the outline lighting of it, and then that will also flood out behind the underline, so you'll get that same element underneath it as well. So that actual mounting bar doesn't become light blocking, and it's actually aesthetically pleasing and is similar in nature to the letters themselves.
And for the colors, it seems like it's hard to visualize the black on the gray.
Well, and one of the reasons that they're black letters, but then on the sides of the letters, because they're 3 inches deep, we're actually going to paint those white. So what it's going to be is you're going to see a black letter with a white drop shadow, which will then create the contrast against the gray background. And then it'll also pick up and really emphasize that white LED glow when it's lighting at night.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Motion on 5C.
Dickman will make a motion, the Plan Commission approves the sign plan submitted by Scott Johnson of Bel Air Cantina for the Bel Air Cantina commercial tenant portion of the property at 7979 South Main Street, with the condition that a permit application for the sign is submitted to the inspection department.
Carl seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, I'm sorry.
Do we need to add a condition for approval?
Revised plans to be submitted
Revised plans.
to the Community Development Department prior to submission of permits for the sign.
Sure.
Commissioner Krell concurs. Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Scafidi, aye.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to 5D, it's a review of proposed sign plan submitted by Valeris Smoke Fins Chocolate Factory for the Chocolate Factory commercial tenant portion of the building at 7979 South Main Street, tax key number 813-9053.
So we're looking at the same building, but we're looking at a different tenant space. There are a couple of signs that are proposed here, one on east elevation on the east and west. They're both internally illuminated LED channel letter signs with a red metal accent underneath that has some raised letters on top of it for their tagline. The raceways are going to be painted to match the building. Each sign is about 31.5 square feet. We have been talking about the height of the sign, and it's appropriate to be discussing that, having these conversations about the overall sign package for the Main Street buildings. The aesthetic for the exterior height of the building visually is a change of building materials, and we've been going off of a 14-foot wall height, which would mean that we would have an overall height limitation of about 25 inches. So that would include all elements of the sign. It looks like these plans, and I'm not sure which ones you had in your packets. It looks like the sign has been reduced in height in order to meet that requirement. So there was a condition of approval for that to be no taller than 25.2 inches, and according to the graphic that's on the screen, it does meet that criteria. So the staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the sign plan submitted by Valeris Smockfin of Chocolate Factory for the Chocolate Factory commercial tenant portion of the property at 7979 South Main Street, subject to conditions 1 through 4 as may be amended by the Plan Commission.
Thank you. You understand that she said that you're accepting those changes?
Yes.
Awesome. Name and address for the record.
My name is Tom Lubner. I represent Primecast Advertising from Grafton, Wisconsin.
Questions?
I have a question about
Commissioner Chandler.
item number 2. Can you provide Carrie a little more information on what this is saying we should not have?
So initially, the portion that says sensational subs and Sundays was a cabinet sign. That has been revised and will no longer be a cabinet sign because cabinet signs are not allowed by the PUD. So this is more going to be acting as a decorative element on which the raised channel letters will be mounted. So it's almost acting as if it's a decorative raceway. It will not be illuminated itself. The letters themselves will be halo lit on that decorative element. So this is just clarifying that the red portion will not be a cabinet.
Okay.
And one additional question, what is the black strip? What is that? Because it's
Is
longer
that-
than the wording.
That's the raceway. That's to match the color of the building.
Oh,
So
Thank you.
We will be reducing the penetrations into the wall.
Same as the previous one.
We do have one change since I last talked to Carrie. The chocolate factory is changing their colors from red to blue.
Okay.
Is that a problem? Okay, fine.
Color change.
Oh.
Red's now blue.
What's the color blue?
It is a Sherwin-Williams. It's called Fountain. So we will be trying to match that color.
We have an example of that. I don't know. Fountain.
Hold up your sheet.
Is it Old Creek blue?
It looks pretty close.
Yeah,
He's
it
got
looks
it.
pretty close.
Old Creek blue. Let me see.
Okay, did you all see that?
You got it?
Yeah, that's good.
In the walk.
That's good.
It looks sensational.
Anything else? Motion.
Carl moves the Plan Commission approves the sign plan submitted by Valera Chocolate Factory for the Chocolate Factory commercial tenant portion of the property at 7979 South Main Street with the following conditions. We can strike one.
Yep.
Making one, the red finished aluminum background element for the tagline portion of the sign is not approved as a cabinet sign and should not be illuminated. The white channel letters on the background may be illuminated. 2, that all revised plans be submitted for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of sign permit applications. And 3, that a permit application for the sign is submitted to the inspection department.
Chandler, second.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Again, do we need to have the blue and also the review of the sign ordinance?
We have that, we have all revised plans to be submitted for review by the department.
Okay. That's tonight.
David Chai.
PDI.
All right.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Moving on to item 5E, it's a review of site and building plans submitted by Occidental Development in addition to the existing garage and the property at 9170 South 20th Street, text key number 877-9014. Carrie.
Request is for an addition to the existing garage. It does have a different address. However, the property is on the 20th Street address, which is why there's a difference in the report. It is, this is the proposed location here highlighted in yellow on the screen. It's actually going to be on the back of the existing garage, so it'll be closer to the north lot line. As depicted in this graphic here, it will meet the setback requirements. It'll more than meet that setback requirement to the north. There will be no additional impervious surface as it will be built on existing concrete. Gives you a schematic of what that will look like. It's basically building out so that it's a complete square. The proposal is to match the existing building materials of the garage, which will look something like this. However, stucco is not specifically listed as an approved building material in the code, so it'll need a 3/4 majority approval of the Plan Commission, and staff does support that that building material. Staff's recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Occidental Development LLC for the property at 9170 South 20th Street, subject to conditions 1 through 2. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Questions or comments on this item?
I have a question.
Mr. Chandler.
For the arrows on the picture you're showing, is that where the addition will be? Is that what that's showing?
Yes.
On the concrete, just that little slab right there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And then my other question for the applicant is, what is the purpose to the addition?
Name and address for the record.
Fast Tanglewood Apartments. Right now, that area, the concrete area, is used for basically things that don't fit in the garage area. So now it's going to be used for the same purpose, but now it's not going to be unsightly.
Thank you.
Anything else?
And as you can see, I probably should fire my architectural firm that I used.
You went pretty basic on the. We got the idea, though.
Okay, good.
Anyone else? Motion.
Seifert moves that the Planning Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Occidental Development LLC for the property at 9170 South 20th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that all revised plans, site, building, landscaping, lighting details, and so forth are submitted in digital and paper forms for review and approved by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
All seconds.
Roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Really?
David, aye.
Tweedy, aye.
Burrell, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Good luck. Have a good night. Moving to 5F, it's a review of a certified survey map submitted by Walden OC LLC for the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue, tax key number 784-9021. Carrie.
The request is to create 2 building lots and an outlot or 2 that will be dedicated to the city of Oak Creek for right-of-way and for other improvements on the site. Let's see. Lot 1 will be 28.7580 acres. Lot 2 will be 21.1845 acres following division. Both the lots conform to the requirements of the B6 Interchange Regional Retail District. Lot 1, you'll note, is the proposed location for the IKEA development, which is up next on the agenda. Lot 2 does not have a proposed development plan at this time. You will note that there is a condition for there to be wetlands shown on all the pages, and that's for consistency, so that anybody who's reading this CSM is not confused should there be any pages that go missing. Everybody's on notice that the wetlands are there. So the staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Walden OC LLC for the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue be approved, subject to conditions 1 and 2. Mr. Mayor.
And who's representing the applicant? Name and address for the record.
There are 2 of us here. I'm Debbie Tomchek with Reinhardt Burner, 1000 North Water Street. Kevin Kennedy is also here with Northwestern Mutual, and we have more folks here to talk about the next item. Just a couple of clarifications. In addition, on the site plan or on the CSM, you'll see Outlot 1 is actually also dedicated to the city. We've talked about that with staff, but just to clarify, that will need to be dedicated to the city and noted as such. And then on page 4, sheet 4 of 7 on the CSM, the public sidewalk easement is actually going to be shown on the CSM, but also noted with a separate document number, so we'll know what the terms of that easement are. And we're hoping that you'll approve that and move us forward to what's almost the last meeting that we'll have for the IKEA to get started. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? I had a comment form request from Kevin Lampe on F. Welcome.
Thank you. Kevin Lampe, 8436 South Howell Avenue, Oak Creek. Just a couple things. Process is moving around pretty quick for IKEA. I have one question. Would all this development continue to go forward if in the end the creation of the TID number 12 did not happen? You might ask why I asked that, and I would state that because it is in fact still in violation of Wisconsin state statutes. What we went over at the last Planning Commission meeting. This TIF is in violation of the TIF law. The way the project costs are associated going to IKEA is not in keeping with neither the spirit nor the letter of the law. So my question I'll ask again, I don't know who can ask that. Would all this development continue to go forward if in the end the creation of TID number 12 did not happen?
Doug Seymour.
I guess, Kevin, I mean, irrespective of what your stated position is on the applicability of the TIF statutes, this is a land division request. And given the access issues and the provision of public access to this site, regardless of whether you feel that was appropriate or not under the statute, it is in fact appropriate under land division code. So from the perspective of this particular item, this land division, it really is mutually exclusive of any TIF discussion. Now, in practice, you may ask yourself whether or not the entire development would follow that, but that's not germane towards the Plan Commission's discussion of whether or not the land division is in fact appropriate.
And we've noted your objection to the TIF. You've stated it a couple times previously. It's noted. We're not asking you to agree with us on it, but as to Doug's point, it's not germane to what we're talking about tonight.
Okay. Just be aware we are moving forward in other avenues. Can I ask a question? There's still, after the Common Council votes on the creation of the TID next Tuesday, then it goes before the review board. So either one of those two events could end the TID. Is that correct?
Both the Common Council has to adopt a resolution approving the TIF district, as does the Joint Review Board.
And then is there still any say from the state as to whether or not the TID is legal and can be moved forward?
It is the application is filed to the Department of Revenue.
And they have some kind of review over it?
They can review every TIF that comes in.
I mean, you'd have to check with them as far as what their specific review is, but provided that the TIF meets the legal requirements, I mean, they're looking at it just for incompleteness of the submittal.
Okay, I'm just trying to make everybody aware, not be surprised when the state says, well, in fact, this is not in keeping with TID law.
We understand your point, and most of us disagree with it, but you have every right to make it.
Thank you, Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions on this item or comments?
Can I have one more question?
Sure, go ahead.
There was one dissenting vote. It was unanimous across the board except for Commissioner Chandler was not present, and Commissioner Correll did vote against it. Is it possible we could get Commissioner Correll's reason why he voted against it?
I'm not sure that'd be appropriate in this forum.
Okay.
If Commissioner Correll chooses to share that with you.
I'll just defer to Doug at this point, but at this point.
That's also a private conversation you can have with Commissioner Correll at any time. All right, any other questions or comments? Motion on 5F.
I think we make a motion, the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Walden OC LLC for the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue be approved with the following two conditions. One, that the delineated wetlands are shown on all applicable sheets of the map prior to recording. Two, that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with the municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are made prior to recording.
Seifert seconds.
Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Rello, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Correll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Moving on to 5G, it's a plan review of site building and landscaping, lighting, and signage plan submitted by Elizabeth Gabor, IKEA Property, Inc. for an IKEA retail building on a portion of the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue, tax key number 784-9021. Carrie.
These are the site and building plan requests for the IKEA property we were just discussing. we have quite a few plans to go through, so I will try and do my best to go in an expeditious manner. These are subject to the B6 Interchange Regional Retail District requirements. The uses that are requested include furniture and home interiors, primarily as the use of the store, with an accessory warehouse, and internal restaurant, specialty food store, and children's play area. With the exception of cart storage and customer pickup areas, no outdoor storage or display or sale of merchandise is proposed, and that does exclude signage. On the screen is the proposed site plan. Parcel meets all lot, area, and width requirements following the CSM that was just reviewed. The proposal includes one single-story, 43.5-foot tall building on the northeast corner of the parcel in conformance with all required setbacks. The total building footprint is 290,516 square feet, which is less than the maximum allowed 40% of lot, which would allow them to build up to 501,079 square feet. Access, loading, and parking on the site is through 3 access points, which unfortunately you can't see all of them, so I will just go south to north. There is a southern access point, which is their main entry point. There is a central drive, which also has a bus stop and pad just north of it. And then there is a northern access drive, and trucks will be directed mostly to the south and north drives. There are 2 loading areas that are proposed on the building. One is on the southeast corner down here. That's mainly for home delivery services. And then there are 6 main loading docks on the north elevation. There is a space reserved for a future 7th. The minimum required per the code is 5. Customer parking is provided on the west and south. Employee parking is provided on the north. There is a minimum requirement of 3 stalls per 1,000 gross square feet for destination retail buildings, at least 250,000 square feet in size, which would require 872. 995 are actually proposed in the plan. Going on to signage, these are the actual signs that we will be reviewing tonight. They are circled, and I did that to hopefully try and make that a little bit easier for people, because the signs that are shown on here that are not circled are actually parking locators, which are not considered signs per the code, or the cart corrals, which are not considered signs per the code. There are a couple of other call-outs here that don't actually, they aren't either signs either, but they're called out on the sign plan. So the first one is a sign that is a 3-sided sign on a 108-foot tall pole. Each sign face, 3 sides, 575 square feet each. That is in conformance with the B6 district. There is one requirement for landscaping to be added to the base of the pole, and we have had that conversation with the applicant. So a revised landscaping plan will be required. There's also an entrance sign that's highlighted in red here. It's 2-sided. It's about 13 feet tall, just over it. And that'll be located at the south entrance, so the main entrance. Each sign face is just over 54 square feet. That's also in conformance, and then the same kind of requirement for landscaping at the base, which we've discussed with the applicant. This is what the welcome sign is going to look like. It's highlighted in red. It will have welcome, and it will have the hours of operation. And when we talk about the wall signs, these are the elevations on which they are proposed. So on the south elevation, which is the top, there is one 367 square foot, roughly, externally illuminated channel letter sign in yellow with the IKEA logo. In the center here, you have an entrance sign, which is 52.9 square feet, internally illuminated in red. Exit is 24.4 square feet, internally illuminated in white. There are 3 signs on the southeast portion, and those are 675 square feet, externally illuminated seasonal banner, then the IKEA logo, which is 573.6 square feet, and then finally the home furnishings, which is 412.4 square feet. We go to the north elevation, which is down here. Again, the large IKEA with home furnishings, same size as on the south elevation, and then another IKEA sign which matches the southwest in size and shape. Then the same IKEA and home furnishing signs on the east with the same banner, all the same size and illumination. And then on the west, there is one IKEA sign that matches the same size as on the north and southwest corners. And the ground signs that we have for advertising in the parking lot, we have essential information signs, one 4-panel, which is 8 sides. That's this one right here up on the top right. Those are externally illuminated and just over 42.5 square feet each, about 10 feet tall. And then the commercial information signs, there are 3 2-panel, 4-sided signs throughout the parking lot. Each is about 30.2 square feet per face. The total square footage for these signs is 704, which is less than the maximum allowed per district code. Then we have wayfinding sign. Oh, this is what the panels are proposed to look like. These are examples for each. And the remaining signs include wayfinding, which are directional and exit. We won't go into all of those. Suffice it to say that there are there's one group of 3 single-sided and 1 double-sided sign identified as 6.1. They're slightly too big. We have had a conversation with the applicant, and those will be reduced in size to a maximum of 15 square feet to be in compliance. Then finally, for signage, we have a couple of commercial flags. There are 8 proposed on 40-foot tall flagpoles, double-sided flags measuring 117 square feet per face. The maximum is 120, so this is in conformance. The location is on the north side of the South Drive, so you'll have the entrance sign on the south, and then the flags on the north of the south entrance, if that's not confusing for you. There's no off-premise sign, monument sign proposed at this time. However, when the development on the remaining parcels, if it goes forward, at that time we'll have potentially a common monument sign. So the building materials are per elevation, basically preformed composite vertical wall panels in blue, preformed composite horizontal wall panels in yellow at the entrance. There's a 2-foot exposed curb or knee wall at the base of the entire building. Glazing is maximized on the south elevation at the entrance and exit areas and on the west elevation for the restaurant area. Canopies are proposed over the restaurant entrance on the west, on most of the southern elevation, over the trash compactor area on the north, and over the employee entrance on the northwest. There are also several roll-up doors on all but the southern elevation. If we go to the site plan, just give you an idea, we've got the building occupying most of the north, then we have the parking, and then there's a stormwater pond proposed on the south. Sanitary sewer has not been extended to the northern property limit per the utilities comments. Utility has also provided some additional comments on that, and staff recommends working closely with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility, as well as the engineering department, regarding the location and installation of required utilities and infrastructure. Lighting plans have also been submitted. There will be parking lot lights using the Gleon LED luminaire on 30-foot tall gray poles, and also canopy lighting will be used on most of the southern elevation, wall packs to illuminate the rest of the building. Landscaping plans have also been submitted, reviewed by the city, forester, and community development. There might be there have been some revisions made to the plans based on the fact that the parking was reduced. Also, there aren't mechanicals that are shown necessarily, but any mechanicals would be required to be screened. And any additional revisions to the landscape plans, we are proposing a condition of approval that they be submitted to the Community Development Department. And those revisions would include such things as the landscaping at the base of the signs as mentioned. The staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by Elizabeth Gabor, IKEA Property Inc. for the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue, subject to conditions 1 through 8. Mr. Mayor.
Open up for questions and comments from the commission. Mr. Chandler?
Okay, let's start with the first proposed sign, the 3-sided sign. So does this meet our requirements?
That sign does meet the requirements of the B6 district.
And then the 2-sided sign, does that meet the requirements?
All the signs that are proposed, with the exception of the 6.1 sign, which is slightly too big, do meet the requirements of code.
Even the quantity?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Dickman.
A couple items. That stormwater pond, would that also handle the stormwater from the other acreage that may be developed at a future time, or will that have its own stormwater pond?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. Let me
Go ahead, say it again.
Well, the stormwater pond that's shown there, will that also handle both developments? You know, in other words, the one that's going to be developed on the lower portion? Or are they going to have a separate one?
Anybody want to tackle that one? Name and address for the record.
Jim Hansen with Grafe, 125 South 84th Street in Milwaukee. I'm engineer working on the IKEA. And the stormwater management pond is signed for just the IKEA parcel itself. So development south of the main wetlands, south of the IKEA will
Have its own.
require to handle its own stormwater.
And then I had another question. Carrie, I may have missed it, but I thought you said something about the parking was reduced. And so I may have missed that point. I'm sorry.
So originally, when the plans were submitted, there were over 1,000 parking stalls, and they actually extended up to about 3/4 of the way on the western elevation from south to north on the building, as well as further. Oh yes, there was a small area that was further west on the southern part of the parking lot as well. Based on the conversations that staff and the applicant had, that parking was reduced. It was overparked based on the code requirements. Okay. So this allows for any kind of future expansion, should there be any, to have areas for future parking to expand as well. But it currently allows for additional green space until that time, as it comes, that they would need to expand.
And the last thing, and it's not on here, I want to ask a question. What's the status of the access to 27th Street?
The future Phase 2 roadway is still in the plans, and at this point in time, those plans have not been approved, and there really is no timetable as to that, other than to say that certainly all the parties agree that it is something that is beneficial for the city, and we'd be looking to pursue that as quickly as possible, given what resources are available to complete that.
Okay, I just want to know what the fire department felt about just having the one road coming in.
Another week with a lot of TV time for you.
Yeah.
It is. It is. I don't know if that's a good thing. Mike Kresick Fire Department, as far as the secondary access road off 27th Street, it has been discussed. It is a concern for the fire department, yes. So there's definite benefit to the community, and there's definite benefit to IKEA to have that access point. There's also, from a public safety standpoint, a need for an additional access road. Understanding that there are timetables and factors outside of our control, we are still pressing for it.
Understanding as well that the roadway design is more than your standard entrance driveway to a business would be. It's robust enough to support what we hope will be the emergency access needs of this development. Certainly it'd be beneficial to have that second point of access, but it helps that the roadway is designed to accommodate a boulevard, in essence, that would provide some additional assurance for additional access to that site.
Do you think the apron of the interstate gives you a second platform to, if you had to have fire access to the building? From spraying water, for example?
Potentially, yes. Certainly when you get into those type of access situations, they're very unusual. In a pinch, yes, we could certainly make that work. Would it be in a timely fashion? That would be based on circumstances.
Commissioner Carrillo.
Can you explain a little bit more about the banner that is in the signage? It calls for a banner. It looks like it has the couch picture on it.
The home furnishings and then the view. Debbie Tomczyk, Reinhardt Berner, 1000 North Water Street. So you actually see it, I think, now displayed on the screen. So that is the IKEA banner with the product that's also advertised.
Is it just a grommeted banner, or is it a semi-permanent structure on the...
Call for more help. Dan Wiegesbach is also here. He's our architect.
Dan Wagasback, Greenberg Farrow, with the architects for IKEA, 1430 West Peachtree Street, Atlanta, Georgia, 30309. The seasonal banner it's not a grommeted, it's not a flapping sign. It's on a permanent, rigid frame, so it's not flapping in the wind. It is a solid sign.
Okay.
But it is we call it seasonal because it is changed out seasonally.
Okay. Thank
It highlights something that IKEA wants to.
Yeah, it could be a couch, a chair, anything that's sold within the store.
How's the weather in Atlanta?
Same here. It's actually
not hotter.
It's hot everywhere.
And real quick, and we let that be part of our signage, is that we would advertise a product and put a price on it.
This type of signage is allowed in the B6 district, so yes.
Alden Bukevich?
Really, it ain't regarding signage. Loading docks. Most of the major product will come in on the north loading docks, and the trucks will be directed to the farthest north road.
Yes, with the exception of the home delivery, which is on the southeast.
Just regarding delivery schedules, is that when the trucks arrive, or do they predominantly come 5 in the evening till 5 in the morning, anything like that? Any predictability to that? Maybe I'm asking something you can't answer.
I can answer that.
Okay.
It's normally in the middle of the night till early morning.
Oh.
They want to avoid rush hour. They don't want to be in evening rush hour traffic.
That's great. It won't.
Yeah, and so then there is the trucks are brought in and then unloaded during the day.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Commissioner Chandler?
Can you provide examples of the central information signs or commercial information signs? It's all the gray backing, but not actual information.
Bear with me. Okay, so we have customer information. Which ones are you referring to?
So there were two: essential information signs and commercial information signs.
So these are on the screen right now. The essential information sign panel is the 4-panel on the top right, and then the commercial information sign panel is the 2-panel, which is just kitty corner down to the left of that.
So what information goes on there? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Is this a fixed sign or is this a digital sign?
It's a fixed sign.
And so once it's done, that's what's going to be on it. So there's going to be these types of messages, or are these the messages that are going to be on it?
These are examples of the messages that could be on those panels.
Got it. Okay.
So, for instance, the example that they have in the commercial information sign is regarding home delivery service or assembly and installation. The essential information sign lets you know, for example, that you can always bring your product back if you're not satisfied with it. Those are the types of panels that they're proposing here. Now, the number of, I think there's only one of the 4-panel that is proposed in the parking lot. So there's only going to be one quad panel sign.
So are these all the signs you circled?
Right. So the signs that are circled are the signs that are mentioned in the B6 code, and then the rest are actually, see, the green diamonds represent cart corrals, and then the red diamonds represent just parking memorizers. So this is aisle B, for instance. Those don't count toward signage because they're direct. They're not even really directional.
Then another question in regards to the site materials. Do they meet the requirements?
Site materials?
Mm-hmm. The materials for the building, glazing, etc.
Yes, they meet the requirements of the B6 district.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions or comments? I have 2 audience requests.
Just one clarification also on item 3C in the staff report, page 3 of 6. I believe we've calculated on that east elevation so that our wall signage does conform at this point.
Yes, it does. I apologize that I neglected to say that. Yes, we are no longer, that sign actually does conform. I miscalculated on the east elevation.
some confusion in how our plans were presented, so thank you.
So you're fully conforming.
Yes.
Nick Schmidt.
Well, before he comes
Go
up,
ahead.
to my understanding, I thought you said that 6.1 was not conforming. Is that part of?
Just the signs on the east elevation, the wall sign on the east elevation does not need to be changed. The other signs are slightly too large. Those will need to be changed.
And we are aware of that change, and we will make that change.
Thank you.
Now Nick Schmidt.
I got hungry at some of those other proposals. I got to get out of here. Mr. Schmidt, 7842 South 13th Street. I was just understanding that we're going with this lighting and everything, and the property really hasn't been sold or completed yet. Is this unusual that we're going with the lighting, and we don't even know if this is all taken care of? And
I believe the
Northwest
property has
Mutual
been
doesn't
sold. Is
have
that
the money
correct?
in their pocket?
Still
But
negotiating?
it's not uncommon that we have a CSM and a site plan review for that property on the same night. It's usually contingent, the site plan approval is usually contingent upon the CSM being approved.
Okay, thanks for that.
And typically, the approval of site and building plans and in many cases, the subdivision of the property is a precursor to the actual development and actually needs to occur while the property is under option. So ownership is not a requirement for the filing of site and building plans.
Okay, a couple other things now. This is, to the south is residential area yet. And all these lights that they're gonna have, is this gonna interfere with the people's residential living?
I would say we try in every development that we do to limit the exposure of the people that are adjacent to the development properties, and we've done a really good job. And one of the things I remember people talking a lot about was the Drexel Town Square lighting and how it would impact those neighborhoods across the street on Hall Avenue. And I think we've done a really good job of making that not happen. And Doug has some more comments.
Sure, the city certainly has standards for light trespass. To say that you won't notice that there is light there would be incorrect, as it's going to be noticeable that there's actually something there. I mean, that's the case in any development, but in terms of the actual measurable foot candles leaving that property, it does have to meet the standards of that zoning district and the city's lighting standards.
So you will see the lights. I mean, if the people have, residential people have their bedrooms in the back there, make sure that they have good blinds on it so they can't see the lights. Well, like I say, it's just this wall right over here. I might as well talk to the wall because everybody is in favor of IKEA. Another thing to the storm, somebody brought up the storm stormwater. That place there is total wetland. I mean, I've been and back over there. Now you're going with 1,000 parking spots, blacktop. They've been working over there for quite a while. They have a water problem. I mean, they've dug down, they've gone up to the west, dig this because of water. I've been back there before this all started, and there's constantly water running. So I'm thinking this stormwater retention pond, or whatever it's gonna be, is that gonna be adequate to hold the water when you've got that many blacktop parking spots without flooding the residential area? Does anybody know about the problem that we do have with water in that area? Drexel Avenue, and everybody knows this too, since they did that, it was always flooded. They had it barricaded when we had a lot of rain. So they have alleviated that for a while now, but we're still, now when we're doing with all this blacktop, I really worry about that too. And the water's gonna come towards the residential area, which they could be flooded out also. Did anybody ever know this area?
I'm going to
with the
defer to
water
Commissioner
problems
Johnson,
we had there?
who's going to talk about stormwater and why
Well,
stormwater.
it just came, I know it's lighting, but it's just they brought it up with the storm. You know, okay, it's,
No,
I should.
I'm more than willing to talk about it. I'm
Okay.
going to have him, who's an expert on that, tell you why when you have big parking lots, you have to do something with the water.
Yeah, but there's water running there constantly, and if somebody stopped it, you know, so I don't know if there's a artesian well or something down there, but I just want to make sure that when this gets all developed, we got this pond there, that we're not going to have a water problem there
Take a
for the
crack at it,
residential people that live there.
We understand that.
And I'm quite familiar with it. Been working on the Drexel Avenue project for a while
Okay.
now.
Good.
There's 60 acres that drain down. Used to be the tree line just north of where 20th Street would be extended north of Drexel. 60 acres drain down through that channel. This drainage will continue to come there. It'll IKEA will take care of their site. Their stormwater will be designed to be controlled through this pond and released at a slower rate. So you're not going to get the big rush of water coming across the property going through all this asphalt. It goes to the pond first. It's slowed down. Then it's released at a 2-year rate. So it's going to slow down the water for you.
Okay. Another question too is, I don't know if the lighting has anything, but they're working on that, but who's the alderman in that area?
I guess you know it's me.
Okay, has anybody complained about the work that's being done after midnight? The hammers going on and the road construction?
No, I've not had an email or a phone call.
You should know that, you know. I mean, I've talked to the neighbors in the area, and I think you should be aware of this and find out what the problem is, why they're working on this with lights and hammers and everything at midnight.
Sir, with all due respect, I can't look into something I've never heard about before.
Well, okay, now you will, because I'm letting you know about it. So if it happens again, I mean, this is a residential area. You know, people sleep at night.
Please send me an email.
Okay. I'm not going to send you, I'm telling you right now. So I don't email. I don't do any of that stuff. I'm telling you right now that check into it.
Please pick up a telephone and keep it to the appropriate. We're talking about the plan.
And I guess I would suggest that the city does have mechanisms for people to advise us if they feel that there are activities going on in their neighborhood that are contrary to the municipal code.
Okay, well, it's your district, right? Okay, so I'm thinking maybe it's part of it, maybe with the lights, what they're working on, but why are they doing it at midnight? So you should be concerned about that too, don't you think?
The lights you're speaking of?
You know, maybe they're doing underground, you know, we're talking about the lighting system, they're doing something more than what's going on, you know. I don't know what's going on over there, so I would think that you, as being the alderman in that area.
Hold on 1 second. Are you talking about the interstate, or are you talking about the property that we're talking about?
No, the parking lot going in there, probably it goes into the elementary school and into the IKEA.
I don't believe there's any work being done on that school site outside of like a normal day work hours. Is that correct?
If you have information to suggest otherwise, please bring it to the attention.
You brought it to the attention of the alderman,
Yeah.
you brought it to the mayor,
Okay,
we're good.
Over. Okay.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I'm not
Okay.
aware of it. I've never had a complaint.
I know. It just started last night, really.
Trust me. I get a lot of complaints about a lot of things. I've never heard that one.
Just
Okay. Well, you didn't know about Western Middle School either, about they cut. Okay, let's see. Let me.
Mr. Schmidt, the work last night was just removing some concrete panels along Drexel Avenue so they could do that safely without all the traffic during the day.
There you go.
That was a one-time thing.
Okay.
Problem solved.
See, we got
Problem
it.
solved, you know.
No wonder we didn't.
Now we all know.
Now I know who our older person is too, but.
All right, what do you got? You wrap it
I
up.
think that's child. Oh, by the way, here's one other thing too for IKEA. Don't put a child's dresser as their logo up on top of the building, because we've lost a bunch of children because of the dresser falling on them. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin Lampe. No questions? Okay. Thanks, Kevin. All right. Any other questions from the commission? Motion on 5G?
Pavich will make a motion that the Plan Commission approve the site and building plans submitted by Elizabeth Gabor, IKEA Property, Inc. for the property at 1830R West Drexel Avenue with following conditions. Number one, that all signs meet the dimensional and square footage requirements of the B6 Interchange Regional Retail District. 2, that all revised plans, site, building, landscape, lighting, details, etc. are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications. 3, that all mechanical equipment, ground, building, and rooftop is screened from view. 4, that all building and fire codes are met. 5, that stormwater, grading, and road plans are coordinated and submitted for final approval to the engineering department prior to the issuance of permits. 6, that the final lighting plans indicating luminaire type, pole type, color, and height are submitted for final approval by the electrical inspector prior to the issuance of building permits. 7, that all water and sewer utility connections are coordinated with the Oak Creek Water and Sewer Utility. 8, that the detailed landscape plans are submitted for review and approval by the Director of Community Development prior to the issuance of building permits.
Dickman will second.
Dickman seconds. Roll call.
Dickman, aye.
Dunstan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Pavich, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Correll, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
All right, moving on to 5H, a review of a certified survey map submitted by Pete Caruso, Black Bear Bottling Company for the properties at 9750R, 9770, 9856, and 9860 South 20th Street. Tax key numbers as listed. Carrie.
This is a request to combine all the properties with the property at 9770 South 20th Street. And post CSM, the entire property will be 9.42 acres. This is related to an expansion plan that was scheduled for tonight, but has been placed on hold by the applicant's request and also per staff recommendation. We've included some conditions regarding the utility and drainage easements to be included on the CSM prior to recording. With that, the staff recommendation is that the Plan Commission recommends to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Peter Caruso, Black Bear Bottling for the properties at 9750R, 9770, 9856, and 9860 South 20th Street be approved subject to conditions 1 through 3. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Any questions? From my understanding, this is another expansion by Black Bear Bottling, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Very dynamic company, constantly growing, great product. Any questions? Motion.
David will make a motion that the Plan Commission recommend to the Common Council that the certified survey map submitted by Pete Caruso, Black Bear Bottling for the properties at 9750R, 9770, 9856, and 9860 South 20th be approved with the following conditions. 1, that the existing utility and drain easements per CSM 3750 and South Branch Industrial Park plat are shown on the map prior to recording. 2, that deferred special assessments are paid prior to the recording. 3, that all technical corrections, including but not limited to spelling errors, minor coordinate, geometry corrections, and corrections required for compliance with municipal code and Wisconsin statutes are met prior to recording.
Seifert seconds.
Seifert seconds, roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Trailer, aye.
David, aye.
Speedy, aye.
Crawley.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
And item 5I is rescheduled to July 26th meeting, Plan Commission meeting. And final item is 5J. It's a plan review of site and building plans submitted by the City of Oak Creek for a communications equipment screening structure on the property at 255 East Centennial Drive, tax key number 860-9037. Caesar is here to talk about that. The last thing between us and going home.
So then I need to make it short, I guess. My name is Caesar Geiger. I'm the IT manager for the city. Basically, what we've done is in the past, we created and built a 145-foot communications tower, cell tower, another name for it, right next to the fire station on the east side. And we've had several potential vendors come to us and say, we'd like to locate on your tower. We do not have any signed contracts yet, but rather than have carriers down at the base of the tower putting in their standard 12-foot by 20-foot structures, we decided that we wanted to incorporate and make this look like the fire station and match the fire station, and so that all the equipment that a potential carrier would come with would be hidden inside a structure. So what we did is we commissioned Strand Engineering to design us a structure. It's basically walls with no roof, and it is made of the same materials as the existing fire station. So it'll be the same brick and stone and capstone. So it's a structure that's 32 feet wide or 34 feet wide and 21 feet long. And it'll house 3 individual cells inside there. Each cell will be 10 by 18. And as each carrier comes online, or each person who wants to locate on our tower with antennas, they will locate inside one of those units. The walls are the same height as the generator to the east of it, so it will match the building exactly there. The structure is just south of the tower. It's centered on the tower. It's more than 150 feet away from the east property line. There's a easement there that you can't build in along the east side of the property, and it's more than 150 feet away from it. It's centered in between the utilities that are already there. There will be access gates and access on the south side of the structure. So the north side will be all brick and stone. The south side will have 3 6-foot metal gates. The metal gates will be painted red and match the gates that are on the existing south side of the fire station now for the electric enclosure. Inside, I guess one other thing I should say, inside there will be stone. It will not be concrete floor. It'll be stone, and then they'll put their equipment on that stone. They'll build a metal base for it and then put their equipment on it.
How many carriers could you fit in this thing?
We have 3 individual cubicles or cells in there, so we can fit 3 carriers. The tower has room for a minimum of 3 major carriers. There may be 1 or 2 single antennas sometime down the road that somebody might want to put on, but they would not necessarily need a space like that for them. It would just be an antenna.
And for the public, if they don't know, these can be revenue producers annually for the city.
Yes, we're looking at potentially, and we don't, like I said, we do not have any signed contracts yet, but we're looking at anywhere from $35,000 to $45,000 or more a year per carrier. So if you had 3 of them, that's over $100,000 a year.
Commissioner Dickman.
Okay, the only question I have is this is not going to have a roof on it. Yet the last drawing that there is, it says roof edge detail, and I was just wondering what does that mean if you're not going to have a roof? Last page of our handout, sheet 8. I believe it. Yeah, 8. Is that it?
Yeah. Looking here.
You see, it says roof edge detail.
Back page.
Back page. I see face brick. What it is pre-finished metal roof edge. So
do they dress up the seam?
They're dressing up the top of it,
yeah, okay.
Similar to what we did here, where we have a metal flashing to get the same color on it. It's a cap.
Just a cap is what it is.
Correct.
Okay.
The reason we're not putting a roof on it actually is because cell carriers used to put their equipment inside a building, and then they had to air condition it.
Heat it.
And so if they don't put a roof on it, they don't need any air conditioning. And they're just looking for walls for security, basically.
Any other questions? Commissioner Chandler?
Yes.
So what type of equipment goes in here? If it's 3 cells, it seems like a very small place for 3 vendors.
I guess the best answer I could have, if you'd like, is it's usually 3 to 4 metal cabinets. Each cabinet runs roughly 3 feet by 3 feet in size. And they may put a small generator in there as well, so that they have power. An example of it, one that's exposed, is if you go down Pewits Road, right where the electric towers are, almost at Nicholson, but not quite there. On the north side, there's a pole inside that electric tower, and there's some metal equipment down at the bottom. But what we don't want to do is we don't want people to see those structures that are inside there.
Thank you.
Anything else? Not motion.
Carl moves that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plan submitted by the City of Oak Creek for the property at 255 East Centennial Drive with the following conditions. 1, that all building and fire codes are met. 2, that all revised plans, including site, building, and landscaping, are submitted in digital and paper formats for review and approval by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Seifert seconds.
Seifert seconds, roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Earl, aye.
David, aye.
VDI.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Motion to adjourn.
Carrillo moves to adjourn at 8:29.
This year's.
Corral seconds.
Corral seconds, roll call.
Hickman, aye.
Johnston, aye.
Carrillo, aye.
David, aye.
VDI, absolutely.
Corral, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Have a great night. We'll see you next Tuesday for the next Common Council meeting.